You need to focus on how you communicate, because usually treasury professionals, they explain terms in a very complex way. So how do you convert complex topics in very simple ways is what will allow you to become a CFO in the future. But also, I think we need to educate our team, because once you're educated, you can think and say, so I don't need to use this here because the problem that I'm trying to solve is different.
Now, if you want to hire a new person in your team, I'm sure you look at trust as one of the key things. How would you identify if this person I can trust or not?
So if you think about this, these are the 4 pillars of trust, right? Do you care? Are you reliable? Are you competent? Are you sincere? We were approaching a point where we would run out of cash. Then you direct the company towards cash. Bruno, what did you do? 4 things, very simple.
First, I would like to really thank you for coming today. And what I have noticed, Bruno, in your impressive career, 17 years, more than 17 years in BRF. And you started in your very early stages with a senior treasury analyst. And then now, mashallah, you're the CFO for international markets. So I'm really interested to learn how this journey happened and walk me through it.
So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. So yes, it's good that you look at my profile as well, right? So I'm happy for that. So yes, I think even before that, I will start before that, right? So actually I started my career working on IT, coding. I was developing software for the financial institutions, right? So this is how I started my career. So I'm Brazilian, right? So back in Brazil, it's very common for us to do like technical high schools, right? Then I went for a technical high school, and then I learned how to code, and this is how I started my career. Then while I was studying economics, I was also working developing software for the banks, right? But at some point I said, look, I want to be on the other side. So I want to be on the corporate side, using the software, not developing the software, right? And then I did my first transition, right? I said, look, I'm gonna go to Europe, do my backpacking, and then once I'm back to Brazil, then this is how I'm gonna apply for a few management trainees. I was listening Nora last time, so she started at Nestle. Similarly, this is how I started my career as well, right? And an interesting aspect of that was, right, so during the last interview was a panel. So 4 senior managers, so 1 treasury manager, 1 costing manager, another 1 accounting manager, another 1 financial planning manager, right? And I learned a few years later that, so the treasury manager convinced the others that I had the right profile for treasury, right? And this is how I started, right? Then I joined as a management trainee. Then my main focus initially was risk management. This is how I started my career. Then I moved to the treasury desk, executing the transactions, derivatives, FX, etc. Then I was invited to build, in a way, the corporate finance function, focus on working capital management and the credit rating agencies as well. And then finally I said, look, I want to be closer to the business, right? I went to business school, and then I got the opportunity, I was invited to join a global business development team for 2 years. Then I went to Singapore, Turkey, Egypt as well, so I was there. And then this is how I got very close to the business from a business development perspective, right? Then 2017, I was invited to come back to Treasury here in Middle East. So they invited me to build the treasury function for Middle East. Until that moment, it was basically accounts payable and accounts receivable. And interestingly, the first thing that I did was to put in place a cash management strategy, right? So, and by doing that, we were able to save $1 million, simply improving FX, interest rates, and bank fees. That's why cash management is so important, and many people underestimate the importance because it's not sexy in a way, right? So then after that, I had the opportunity that was very important for me to manage both FP&A and treasury together. It's very rare, right? But I got the opportunity because of my treasury background and because the CFO knew that I like to be closer to the business. He offered me the opportunity to manage both together, right? And that moment was very important in my career because I could see clearly the link between the P&L and the cash flow. That was very important for me, right? Then a few years later, in 2022, then I was appointed as the CFO for the international markets. And currently, I manage a team from Brazil to China. This is where we are today.
That's very interesting journey, and I would like to walk through it and focus on bit by bit. So let's first start with, because this is the most, for me, this is the most interesting part, where you were initially a treasury guy and then you started handling the FP&A. So what types of skills that you felt as a treasury person, because now you've been in treasury for a few years and now you're starting to handle the FP&A along with it. So what types of skills that you felt that, okay, for me to manage the FP&A, I need to think differently, or I need to have these sort of skills, technical or soft?
Yeah, very interesting point, right? Because although we still within finance, they have different roles and different profiles, right? So I think in simpler terms, right? So an FP&A is very strong analytically. The analytical skills are very important, right? Because you need to look for insights. So you see the opportunities through the P&L. So you see the opportunities from a finance lens, right? On the other side, on the treasury, is negotiation execution, right? So in a way, one day for treasury is very important because it's money in the bank account and interest rates, right? I think these two perspectives, analytical skills, negotiation, and strong execution, this is what differentiate for me mainly the FP&A and the treasury.
And how did you, or what tools, or if there was someone who helped you to sharpen the technical skills and the tools that you needed to have the FP&A role along the treasury?
Very interesting. So first here, right, I think what helped me a lot was my coding skills when I
Really?
started my career, right? Because thinking this way, when you're coding, you are developing an algorithm. You need to think logically what you are trying to solve and how you're going to solve that probably coding, right? So this is very strong analytical skills in a way, right? Starts here. But then, as you said, right, so my background was treasury, right? And then I said, okay, I need to learn more. So how can I do that? Then I decided to go for a qualification. So the Chartered Global Management Accountant by CIMA, right? So in this way, while I was learning on the job, I was also learning through the qualification that I decided to do, you know. So this was the way for me that I tried to learn faster in a way and have more or a bigger impact.
And was there in this transition, was there a role to your manager, your team, in trying to support you and help you transition and having this role?
Definitely, because the CFO at that moment, he was very strong on the FP&A part, on the finance part, right? So then he was able to mentor and coach me a lot, right? At the same time, right, while I was observing and learning different skills, I brought a different perspective. That was the cash perspective, right? Because until that moment, everything, every discussion was purely P&L.
Hmm.
And then I start shifting the mindset of people to say, guys, it's not only the P&L, but we need to transform the results into cash. And I think this is the feedback that I got from my team that was very interesting for them as well, because up until that moment, they were purely focused on the P&L.
And your manager back then, was his experience purely FP&A, or did he have treasury
Mostly
experience?
FP&A.
So did you see any pushback from his end or from the team when you were trying to give them the cash perspective versus the FP&A or balance sheet or P&L perspective only? When you were saying, guys, we need to translate these numbers into cash, did you feel any pushback? And if you did, how were you able to manage that?
I felt that outside of finance, not in
Hmm.
finance, right?
Hmm.
Because since the business leaders, the commercial leaders, they were used as well to look at the P&L, when I brought the perspective of the cash, that was different for them,
Hmm.
right? Okay, we need to increase the coverage. We need to reach more customers. What are the impacts in our DSO? So what are the credit risk or the risks that we are taking? How this will affect our bad debt provision, for example, Then you start having different conversations with the business leaders as well. I think in finance was great. I felt more this resistance in a way outside of the finance function.
I know what you're talking about because I do face that specifically with the sales team. Because for them, numbers are sales, purely P&L. It's very hard for them to grasp the idea of, no, guys, these numbers are just on paper. We need the cash. How did you face that in any point at your career, and how did you tackle that?
Yes, definitely. So definitely many times, right? When I took over, for example, the role or to build the treasury function back in 2017 here, right? It was exactly that. The direction of the business was, guys, we need to sell to more customers. We need to grow the volume, right? And as we start doing that, we have seen as well the overdue increasing because the quality of the new customers were not necessarily great, right? And then I had to have very tough conversations with the commercial team to say, guys, look what's going on. Yes, we are selling more, but look, the overdue. Look at the DSO, how much is increasing. Look at your P&L because now you are receiving more bad debt provision as well, But I think the way that we were able to do that, two fronts, right? First, education. You need to explain to them what is truly value creation. The second one is, right, you need to align the targets. It's not only the P&L target, but then we start having in the sales commission the overdue as one of the targets as well.
When you say value creation, what do you mean by that?
Very good question, right? So I think in my role as the CFO, right, so it's truly to set the direction of the company aiming value creation. Bruno, what is value creation, right? The way that I explain to my team internally is very simple, right? So look, you have your revenue, good. You have your cost, you have your expenses, then you have your profitability. So everyone is happy with that profitability, but it's not enough, right? Because after that is how much capital you are employing to generate that profits. Then you divide the profitability by the capital employed, you have the return on capital employed, or the famous ROIC, right? Very good. Now, what is the cost of capital? So if your ROIC is greater than the cost of capital, you are generating value. If not, you are destroying value. And then I show to them that sometimes even with a greater profitability, you destroy value because your capital employed is very high. So this was the way that I explained to them, right? And I put two shawarma stores to explain the concept for them, So, and then, now I understand why you are so concerned about the capital employed, about the receivables, about the payables, about the inventory, So this was the way that I explained to them how they can create value, not only looking at the P&L, but also concerned about how much capital we are employing and the treasury side, the cost of capital.
In these ratios and in the value creation that you just explained, where is the cash aspect or the cash flow aspect in these formulas?
Very good. And this is where I think treasury brings value, right? Or can generate value. The way that I explain to my team is the following, right? So the finance professionals, usually the FP&A, the management accountants, they are focused on revenue, cost, expense, profitability, which is very important, right? So this is the core. This is how I support the business. Treasury is more focused on reducing the capital employed, reducing the receivables, extending payment terms, reducing inventories, and very, very important on the cost of capital. Because if you reduce the cost of capital, if you are able to borrow cheaper, if you have less financial expenses, it is much easier for you to generate value, or you can generate even more value. So treasury has a very important function, strategic, on the capital employed and the cost of capital.
It's very, very interesting. One thing you mentioned is the mindset. How different is it? Maybe we touched upon it, but maybe to get it a bit more detail. How different is it, the mindset of a treasury person versus an FP&A guy or a finance person? And given someone who, let's say, as a hypothetical example, doesn't have the coding experience that you had, maybe someone who's only treasury, what sort of shifts he needs to make in the mindset if he wants to get into the finance?
Interesting, right? So I think the way that I see is the finance, the FP&A, right? So the question is, how do I improve the business?
Hmm.
How do I increase sales? How do I reduce my cost? How do I reduce my expenses? In a way, is how do I improve the profitability of the business, right? On the treasury side is how do I protect survival of the company while improving the performance of the business?
Hmm.
One take care of improving performance, the other takes care of the survival of the business. And the way that I see is right body, FP&A finance, muscles. You want to make your body stronger. FP&A. On the other side, blood. Without blood, you die.
Hmm.
So treasury is the blood because cash is the blood, right?
Hmm.
So this is the way that I see the different mindsets for both of them.
EBITDA is very, very popular, and everyone looks at EBITDA, from CFOs to FP&A guys to even treasury guys to banks. But this is my personal opinion. I always believe that EBITDA can sometimes be a bit, I don't want to say deceiving, but I don't have another word to say for now.
Misleading.
Misleading, yes. Maybe cash flow, and this is again my opinion, free cash flow, or whatever type of cash flow that you operating cash flow that you want to monitor, might be more, as a treasury professional, might be more representative. What's your take on that?
So internally, very interesting. Internally, everyone knows the expression that I use. Happiness is positive cash flow. So in every town hall context opportunity that I have, I bring happiness is positive cash flow. So people look at me, Bruno, we know happiness is positive cash flow, right? So this is the way that they start understanding that EBITDA is not enough. It's very important, but it's not enough. So then happiness is positive cash flow. So truly what sustains the company in the long term is the cash flow generation, right? So sometimes you can have a great EBITDA, but you are not generating cash. There's a very important metric that we look is the conversion of the EBITDA, free cash flow divided by the EBITDA, right? The greater, the better, right? So, but totally, so I think this is what was the shift in mindset for my team. Not only look at the EBITDA because it's the most important metric for the organization. This is how the bonus are set. This is what triggers the bonus in a way, but also look at the cash flow that this is what will sustain the company in the long term.
You keep triggering a lot of questions in my mind when you speak.
Good.
I was working in one of the companies, and I don't want to mention the name, but this company, even though they are very, very big, but they, in my opinion, had a huge flaw. And this is going to the bonus when you're mentioning the bonus. Their bonus was focused on EBITDA and some other tools. And this led to two main things. They had one really popular approach. They always rotate the leadership team. So a leadership, so let's say for example, if you're a CFO, you're not allowed to spend in one region or one position or one looking after a specific company for more than 3 years. So you have to move. So what ended up happening is they lost strategy and they lost their bloodline. So everyone who comes to a new role, their focus is to maximize the EBITDA and maximize the numbers on paper to maximize their bonus. Foregoing strategy, foregoing having decisions that would sustain the business and make it survive, like what you were mentioning, for the longer run, even after they leave the position and take on a new role. In your opinion, how would you advise a company in that situation to maintain its survival, have a proper strategy, and at the same time incentivize people to have their bonuses um, in a way that they don't render or hinder the performance of the
Yeah.
company or the strategy?
There's a phrase that I like a lot as well is show me the incentives and I show you the results. So in a way, the incentives are very important, right? So if you ask people to focus on EBITDA, they will focus on the EBITDA, right? That's why the performance management culture is very important, right? So you need truly to think about how you are setting the targets for your organization, because this is how they will put energy as well, right? So, and I think here is a balance, but comes from the leadership, comes from the shareholders, right? Comes from the board. So they need to set the direction and the incentives for the organization, right? At the same time, the finance function, the CFO, has a very important role to say, look, EBITDA is not enough. We also need to focus on the cash flow generation, right? But the CFO cannot have only himself the target of the cash flow. So that's why for us, when I see the targets of the CEOs of the business, they have cash flow targets as well. So could be the working capital, that is very important. Could be the free cash flow if they are managing purely a business, right? So could be a DSO target that focus specifically on the receivable side for the commercial team. Could be the DPO targets, that is the payable side for the procurement team. Could be the inventory targets for the S&OP function. But you need to embed in your performance management culture the cash flow in different ways, right?
Very interesting. Okay, moving a bit into the, so we discussed the company, how to have the mindset, some of the technical skills that you might need. Now, for me as a treasury person, let's say I'm a treasury manager and I want to position myself for my managers and for the top management to view me as a potential person to have a more senior finance role and potentially to be a CFO. What do I need to have? What do I need to do to be portrayed in that position?
Yeah, very, very interesting question. I think the first question that I would ask you is, do you really want to be a CFO and why? That's very important. Not all treasuries can be a CFO. Not all treasuries should be a CFO. So once you have clarity why you want to be a CFO and your answer is yes, I want to be a CFO, then my advice would be, first, you need to get very close to the business. Very close to the business. You need to understand the business drivers. What truly generate cash? From where the cash is coming, right? So you need to build very strong internal relationships. And this is where most of the time I see the treasuries failing, because they are so focused in treasury that they are not able to build a strong alliance internally that will allow them to be perceived as a more senior leader in the future, right? And last, you need to focus on how you communicate, because usually treasury professionals, they explain terms in a very complex way. So how do you convert complex topics in very simple ways is what will allow you to become a CFO in the future.
This point is very critical because I have seen this. I have seen this a lot, man.
I can feel.
Because most of the, I will not say all, but most of the treasury guys, they love treasury for the technicalities of it. I'll speak about myself.
And it's okay.
Yeah,
And it's okay,
when I
right? Yeah.
first got attracted to treasury, it was because of the FX and hedging. This was
I have
one
seen
of
this story before. Yes. So exciting, right?
It was
Yes.
very exciting for me. The FX and the forward, the swaps, it was really interesting. For some finance persons, it might be boring. It might be very not clear. It's very hard. But for us, if you really enjoy it, but then the challenge becomes when you are trying to explain it to someone else. And you mentioning that being able to do this gives you an edge. This really hits home. But if I want to give an advice to someone, and I know can be a skill that you don't acquire, but if you can acquire, because I believe my personal opinion is anything can be acquired, any skill can be acquired.
Definitely.
Yes, we are born different. Some people have skills in skill set that's different from others, but in my belief, you can always acquire anything if you work hard and you focus on it. So if I want to give an advice, or you can give an advice to a treasurer who is struggling into simplifying treasury topics to wider audience. This wider audience can be a finance person, can be a sales person, because you're trying to get them on board and understanding how to maintain the bloodline, which we were
Exactly.
just explaining. What are few tricks or few advices that you can give them to try and resolve this and try to be more simple when they are explaining to other non-treasury professionals?
Yeah, the simpler the better,
Mm.
right? So usually, and I see in many different situations, you ask a question, you'll receive a very long answer, right? And I think you as a treasury profession, you need to start observing how people they are able to communicate things very clearly and very simple, right? So in a way, many times that I need to explain a very complex topic, I think how I would explain that for my son,
Mm.
right? So if you ask me, Bruno, how do you explain what is treasury for your son, right? I say, Miguel, so I'm responsible as a guardian of the cash of the company. I'm the angel that protects the cash.
Mm.
So talks about protecting survival, talks about many things. You need to think how can you explain things very simply to kids, or for more senior people, your grandma, your grandpa as well, you know. I think if you start thinking this way, truly reflecting how you are telling things, so I think this already helps you, because reflection is how you start improving things, right?
Mm.
Treasury is changing fast. New risks, new regulations, and new opportunities. You need to keep up to speed. The ACT has been helping treasurers for almost 50 years through networking, events, and qualifications. So if you want to grow your skills and connections, join the community that will give you the voice and the chance to shape the future of Treasury. Visit treasurers.org now to learn more.
And there's one thing I believe that there is, and correct me, please. There is a misconception that senior people who are CFOs, CEOs, they are in this position because they are very technical and they understand very complex uh, things, and their minds work differently. I believe this is a misconception. Actually, these people are there because they are able to break down things into very simple topics or very simple sentences. And when you are communicating with them, this should be the way that you communicate with them simply. You don't need to put a lot of complexity when you are communicating or presenting a challenge or a situation in a company that you think how it should be resolved. You don't need to have a lot of spreadsheets there, a lot of graphs, a lot of things. Just go to the point directly. This is the issue. This is are the scenarios that we can do to resolve it, and this is our recommendation. Very simple, to the point. This is my belief. What do you think, or how do you believe that when I am approaching a senior person, that my message should be? Should it be complex with all graphs and all spreadsheets, or 2 point?
Yeah. Well, definitely you are in the right direction, right? So you need to be straight to the point. Think in this way. A senior leader has many things to think, many decisions to take, right? Simpler you can explain to him or her, easier will be for you to have a decision, right? So what I tell my team, right? So I think usually long explanations they come from insecurity, right? Because you are afraid, you are not sure, then you want to be prepared. You bring a lot of data, a lot of explanations, etc., which is fine, right? In the end, what I tell them is, guys, bring me one slide, one page.
Mm.
So you need to explain me in one page. And this is how I train them. Because yes, if they bring 10 pages, I will understand, will take longer, but they will not learn. So when I force them to bring in one page, 2, 3 slides maximum, this forces them to be more concise, to be straight to the point, to think how they will explain to me what they want and what is the problem that we have.
And usually, what's the structure of this one or 1 or 2 pages that you would like to see? How does it look like?
So what is the problem? Why that's important? What are the potential solutions?
And if I add a recommended solution for that, would that be a plus, or you would like to have it open and then you decide
Definitely
the
no. It's
scenarios?
so you are the expert, right? In a
Mm,
way, because again, senior leaders they have too many things to see, so they don't know all the answers, right?
mm,
So you are the expert. The other guy is the expert. Yes, you bring the problem. So you say why that's important, because sometimes there is a problem,
mm,
but the impact is very minimal.
mm,
So it's not that important, right? And then once you see the importance, you can already say, oh, okay, that's very important. And you bring a few recommendations. But sometimes you don't know.
mm,
So then it's okay only to bring the problem as well, right? So because in a way, I had a boss that used to say, Bruno, you are well paid to solve the problems, right? So and then it's true, right? So the biggest problems come to me, and that's my job, right?
mm.
But of course, if you bring a few ideas, if you bring a few recommendations, right? So it's much easier for us to interact and take the best decision for the company.
So, what is your opinion or what's your take on Steve Jobs' quote when he said, "You hire people not to tell them what to do, but to tell you what to do"?
Definitely, I think that's the direction, right? So, but also the one another quote that I like: "You hire by attitude, not by
Hmm,
skill," right?
I agree.
Because sometimes that person is still learning in the function as well. She doesn't have all the answers, but she has the right attitude to go after the answers.
Hmm,
So then I prefer this, I
hmm,
prefer to hire by attitude than by the technical skills.
hmm. Speaking of technical skills, you mentioned that you started in coding. Now, as we become more and more into technical and automation, digitalization, a lot of treasures starting to go through the path of coding Python, and then it converted to the AI and all this. So, throughout the journey of a treasure and also finance person, how did you see personally coding helping you, and at what stage, to what level you were using it? So, let's say when you were junior to a senior to a more of CFO or a finance director, how did it help you throughout the journey, and how intensive were you using it throughout all these stages?
Yeah, very good question, right? So I think here, if you are an analyst, if you are a manager, I think definitely understanding and learning coding could be very helpful, right?
Mm,
So I see in my team there, so a few guys learning Python, learning how to build the dashboards, learning about machine learning, but because they like. So you need to understand your strength as well. So you are analytically strong and you want to learn that, it's helpful, right?
mm,
So when you go for a director position, a CFO position, here is about literacy. You need to understand the concepts behind artificial intelligence. But most importantly, you need to understand when to apply.
mm,
Because not all situations require very complex solutions.
mm,
Again, sometimes you go very simple, you can solve. You don't need to build a machine learning, artificial intelligence solution, right?
mm,
So that's why at some point, until manager, coding, doing is very helpful. After that, director, CFO positions, you need to understand what is behind and how to use.
mm. And from your opinion, me as a, let's say, a CFO, when do I decide now it's time to use an AI, and where should I use it? How do I decide that?
Yeah, I think, again, so we are just learning where to
Mm,
use, right?
mm,
So first we need to understand what it is, right? But for us specifically, I think treasury, when we implement a new treasury system in a few years ago, so this is when we start using the machine learning to detect fraud.
mm,
So in our tool, we already have embedded in the solution so artificial intelligence tools that allow us to avoid fraud,
mm,
compliance, etc. Right? So this is one aspect. Now, the other aspects that we see is so on the finance operations, you have a lot of transactional work to be done,
mm,
right? So one biggest pain point that we have currently, for example, is reconciliation with the key accounts in terms of invoices, right? I sell to them thousands of invoices, they pay me one payment. How do I reconcile? Right? And they share the statement of account with us by Excel, by PDF, by paper, whatever. Here's where artificial intelligence can help you, because then you put on the tool reads, reconcile, match, perfect, you know? So the way that I see still as of now is towards productivity, right? But also a lot on the fraud, the efficiency of the finance operations, right? Let's see what's coming, how these agents can help us in the future. But as of now, this is where I see the most use cases.
I remember I was attending one conference, if I'm not mistaken. It was the last Eurofinance conference, and I was speaker on a topic around AI. And one of the things I was speaking about is when you are implementing AI, your goal shouldn't be to implement AI for the sake of implementing AI. Your goal should be to look for struggles or where you need to digitalize, like the example that you said, the reconciliation. So you need to look for use cases first. Second is quick wins. So if you find, let's say, 2 or 3 use cases, you should start with the quick win. Which one is easier to implement with less distortion in your operations and will add a quick win right away, saving an hour, 2 hours for the analyst. That was my opinion, and that's how I wanted to send the message to the audiences, that because there is a lot of companies, they have the pressure of you have to have AI now without understanding what's AI going to help us in. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, very good point, right? So what came to my mind is, right, an expression also, don't fall in love for the solution, fall in love for the problem. So truly, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? Everything starts there. What is the problem that you are trying to solve? And this is very interesting when I have conversations with the head of IT as well, because he's a very business oriented person. It's the same conversation, right? Okay, Bruno, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? And then we are gonna look for the solutions. But don't start on the other way around. I want to solve a problem using artificial intelligence. What is the problem? No, right? So what is the problem? Then you look for the solution. Most of the times, you are gonna solve the problem using very simple tools. Very simple tools, right? But also, I think the way that we started specifically last year, because artificial intelligence is so popular, right, and is a big trend, is we need to educate our team, right? And ACT has a very interesting course with a fintech as well about artificial intelligence for treasury. Then I invited about 25 people of my team, even outside of treasury, to learn about artificial intelligence. You know, I think first you need to get educated, because once you're educated, you can think and say, so I don't need to use this here because the problem that I'm trying to solve is different, you know? So I think the first step is get educated. Second is think about the problem that you're trying to solve.
I agree. And speaking about going back to the soft skills, when you reach a position that's very senior, like CFO, let's try to name a few, maybe 2 or 3 soft skills that you need to acquire and focus on when you shifted from a finance manager or a treasury manager to a finance director or CFO.
Yeah, two soft skills came to my mind, right? So first, trust. Second, communication again, right? So in terms of trust, right? So for me, this is one of the most underestimated soft skills currently. Trust is key for you to be able to influence an organization, right? So in last year, I had a very interesting discussion with my direct reports about trust. There is a very interesting book called The Little Book of Trust, right? So because trust is complex. And if I ask you, okay, what is trust, right? So 4 pillars. First, trust. Do you care? Do you really care about your team? Do you really care about what you're doing? Care. Reliability. are you reliable? Do you deliver what you promise? Reliable. Competence, are you competent to deliver what you are supposed to deliver? Then I trust you, right? Fourth, sincere, you mean what you say. So truly, what you're saying is what you mean. So if you think about this, these are the 4 pillars of trust, right? Do you care? Are you reliable? Are you competent? Are you sincere? So trust is very important, right? So, and this you develop, right? The second one in terms of communication, right? As we already discussed it. So you need to be able to translate complex topics in a very simple way. Because these two, trust plus communication, together with the business understanding, they are the foundation of influence. This is how we influence the business. If the leader trusts you because you care, because you're competent, because you are sincere, because you are reliable, and if you're able to explain to him in simpler ways what needs to be done, this is how you're going to influence the company.
It's very, very good, because I've never thought about trust. For me was something new. I always take it for granted that if you have a senior person in your company, that means that you automatically trust him. But I never thought, okay, me as a company or as a shareholder, how do I trust him? How do I decide that, you know what, I'm going to trust Bruno? So from my perspective as a shareholder, I've never thought about it as a shareholder. How do I look? How do I define that this person is trustworthy or not? So let's imagine this. Let's take a scenario. Now, if you want to hire a new person in your team, do you look at trust? I'm sure you look at trust as one of the key uh, things that you want to trust this person, but it's the first time that you meet them, maybe in an interview. How would you identify if this person I can trust or not?
Uh, that's why it's very interesting when you use this framework, right? Because trust, trust has different meanings for different people. But usually you can frame that in one of these 4 pillars, right? So trust for me when I interviewing someone is about competence. Is this person competent to deliver the job description? I will look at the competence, right? Because I don't know if the person cares. I don't know if the person is reliable. I have never worked with them. And I don't know if the person is sincere. Then I will look at the competence. Is this person competent to deliver what needs to be delivered? Or if the person is not competent, which happens, right? So sometimes you did FX and derivatives, but you didn't do that management, for example, right? So is this person willing to learn quickly and will be sincere to say, I don't know, I need to learn? So this is the way that I'm going to look from a trust perspective. The most important will be competence and try to grasp the sincere part, because this is how the relationship will build.
So you have been a CFO now for how many years?
5 years now, yes.
And you've been doing finance aside from treasury for how many years?
The 17.
70 aside from treasury.
Aside from treasury, 10 maybe.
10 years.
Yes.
So 10 years you've been doing something that's not 100% focused on treasury. However, you're still on team treasury.
Yes.
So you contribute a lot to treasures. You contribute a lot with the ACT. So let me ask you this question. What makes you very enthusiastic about treasury, even though you're not 100% a pure treasury person? But for me, for example, I know that I just love treasury. But I'm really interested to know, what is it for you that, even though now you're a finance person, a CFO, of course you have exposure to treasury, but it's not your sole job. What drives you? What keeps you attached to treasury?
Very good question. When I came to this region, 2017, I attended, I think, my first conference of ACT, right? And I think they invited a guest speaker that was the owner of one entity, right? And he was very clear to say, look, until now, I didn't need a treasury. I even had thought about the treasury. It was accounts payable and receivable, right? But then he realized as he grows that he needs someone focused on protecting the business, bringing optionalities, allowing him to grow, right? So why I'm so passionate about treasury? Because I have been there, I have seen the value, as I told you, right? So it's not only accounts payable and receivable, it's much more. So this is about the core of the body, the blood, the cash, right? So this is what sustain the company in the long term, as I told you. So I have experienced that. And when I see this region specifically still starting the treasury journey, this get me very motivated to help people to understand more about treasury, you know. I think that that's why I'm so enthusiastic about treasury, and my team see this enthusiasm internally as well, because I'm always there taking care of them, close to them, because again, for even for a CFO, the cash is very important, the cash flow is very important, right?
But treasury, from my perspective, I have seen treasury becoming a trend only in the past, let's say, 5 to 10 years.
True.
From your opinion, what are the main drivers that made treasury becoming more and more trendy at the moment?
Yeah, I think this is very much for the region, right? So because 15 years ago in Brazil, very strong, because when you have large corporates, public listed companies, capital markets is very developed as in US and Brazil, then treasury is a much more common function, UK as well, right? In this region specifically, because in a way we are still a young region, right? Not Egypt, but GCC, young region, right? So in the past, a lot of money was flowing from oil to these companies. Interest rates were very low. As interest rates start increasing, as we see growth accelerating, and the companies they need more funding, grow quicker. So then we see the importance of the treasury, and this is where. So that's interesting. The way that I see is, you only appreciate the importance of treasury during a crisis, when you have no money. When the company has no money, then the company, the shareholders, the owners, they understand the importance of treasury.
When they run out of cash, you mean?
Exactly.
This resonates because I don't know, like 5 years ago, I was looking for a job, and I reached out to a friend of mine, and he was auditing a specific company. And I told him, "Can you check with them, see if they need a treasury manager?" And this is exactly what they asked him. They told him, "What's a treasury manager?" And what I figured out later is because this company has huge amount of cash, they are cash rich. They had no idea they needed a treasury manager, because they basically, I wouldn't go as far as say they didn't need a treasury manager. I believe that still, even if you have cash, you still
Definitely.
need a treasury manager to operate this cash for you, see where it's best fit to invest it or keep it, because idle cash is a loss. You lose the value of cash if it's idle.
Exactly.
So still you need to operate the cash and work the cash to generate money. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. But I believe even for these sort of companies where they have high amounts of cash, there still needs to be an education to them that you still need a treasury manager, because there are risks of having high amounts of cash. One of them is losing the value of cash. What's your opinion on that?
It's a very good point, but again, because this region, specifically the GCC, inflation is low, currencies are pegged, right? So people don't perceive that, right? But if we go to Lebanon and see what happened, Egypt, high inflation, and in our case specifically, because I have lived at Turkey with a very high inflation, then people perceive. And I think here is a very interesting story, right? So we have a very large business in Turkey. 2022, when I took over, so the country as a whole was already facing a lot of economic challenges. High inflation, low interest rates at that moment, right? FX pressure depreciating because of the policies of the country, right? So then quickly I note that we should increase the liquidity immediately, right? So then we start raising whatever credit we had available. Second half of 2022, situation in the country deteriorate. Business deteriorate because of the low consumption as well, right? Then I aligned with both global and local leaders we need to direct the company towards cash flow generation.
Mm.
Why? Because we were approaching a point where we would run out of cash.
Mm.
Then you direct the company towards cash. Bruno, what did you do? 4 things, very simple. Simplify the business. Look at your portfolio, look at your production, simplify. Second, full focus on the cash conversion cycle. Receive earlier, renegotiate longer payment terms, tight inventory management. Third, look at your balance sheet. Do you have known operational assets that you can sell? Do you have tax that you can monetize? So these 4, during 9 months implementing, this is what allow us to survive in that period until the business got back on track. And then we got a very big VAT refund in June 2023.
Mm.
So, and after that, we were able to turn around the company and say, look, now we are on track. And fast forward, 2024 was the best year ever for the company.
Mm.
We were able to be negative net debt, meaning that we have more cash,
than
that. And then, interesting, right? What was the feedback from my treasury team there? Bruno, now the organization understand what we do and how important we are. Because in the past, it was pay this, pay that.
Mm.
So it was accounts payable and accounts receivable. But after a crisis, that you direct the company towards cash, people understand the importance of treasury, right?
Mm. I had one episode with Muhammad Turayah. He's the regional treasurer for GE Vernova. And he was speaking about this specifically on the role of treasury. And that a lot of companies don't understand how important it is for a treasurer or for a treasury department. That what they did is they took situations where treasury were not involved from the beginning, let's say a specific acquisition or a specific entrance to a new market, and they created a hypothetical situation if treasury was involved from the beginning, and they compared the impact, the value that the treasury would have added to this project versus what they have lost from not involving treasury. And after they did this exercise, treasury was involved in every single thing.
See, exactly, because when people realize the importance and how treasury can contribute, especially for the business leaders, right? Because in a way, this is how they will as well survive within the organizations, right? It's not only profits, but truly, are you generating cash or not, right? So it's very interesting how they were able to educate people through simulations in a way, right? So it's very interesting.
What one advice you would give a treasury person? I know we spoke about this, but one last, if you're going to give one advice, he is looking to potentially be a CFO.
Understand the business.
Hmm.
So to be a CFO, you need to understand the business, right? So I think this is my advice, right? So truly understand the business drivers. So go beyond your niche, right? So your spreadsheets, your bank statements, your websites, go out and understand the business and how the profits flow into the cash.
Love it. Thanks a lot, Bruno. I have learned a lot today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for coming and joining me today. Really appreciate it, man.
Thank you very much for
Thank
the
you, bro.
invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you.